Story 1. Location: Doge's Palace, Venice, Italy. Time: summer of 1997, and somewhere around the 1500s. What happened? Transported/temporarily slipped through time. So I was a U.S. Air Force brat, military dependent. Father was enlisted in the Air Force, living in Germany, and had traveled to Venice with my family during summer vacation. I encountered a lot of new things, like riding the train into Venice, gondolas, Italian architecture, and a brief stint in 1400s and 1600s Doge's Palace. Myself, my mother, father, and my uncle's family were touring the city, and we wound up at Doge's Palace following behind a tour group and just meandering around the grounds. We walked into a large room that was referred to as the courtroom. It was about the size of an indoor basketball court, and I remember that the tour guide mentioned something about the scandalous and deadly events that took place there. I think he was talking about Marino Faliero at the time. Anyway, I remember looking at the back of my mother's head and then doing a survey of the room. It was really crowded with tourists, and there were bright lamps and wall lights everywhere. There was the sea of noise from multiple ethnic and culture groups intermingling together. Anyone who's been to international touristy places knows the loud murmur of multiple dialects and languages being spoken at once. As soon as my vision broke away from the back of my mother's head, she instantaneously disappeared, as did the murmur of the people. In my peripheral vision, I could see a vast difference in the amount of light being cast into the room, and the change in light temperature and hues. Everything was suddenly muted and flickering. The room had the same dimensions and the same general layout, but suddenly any and all signs of modern society had simply vanished. The whole room suddenly had a very different feeling about it. A heaviness, an air of hostility took over the room. It was menacing and dark, unlike the current state of light and airy. I could see the soot patterns on the room and the torches casting a faint trail of it skyward towards the ceiling. Something about the light and shadows stands out about this encounter more than anything else I remember. The transition from modern day to the past was nearly instant, however slow enough to process the fact that something was changing, much like someone walking past a doorway and casting a shadow over a room. In this temporal instance of time dilation or whatever, I could see people. 2 guards with pike-like weapons standing by one of the doorways. I could clearly see skeletal structure of the room, as if someone peeled back the opulence from the walls and ceiling. The throne was still where it was in modern times, but everything else about the room seemed vacant. I began to pivot in order to double-check that I was in the right place and not lost, the whole time soaking in the visual and auditory surroundings. I could hear someone walking down the hall towards the doorway with the 2 guards posted by it. I could hear that hollow echo of each footstep as it echoed off the bare walls, floor, and ceiling in this large open space. The cadence of the footsteps had a sense of purpose and confidence that implied that they belonged there. As I was still pivoting around to see what the hell was going on, I locked eyes with the man whose footsteps I could hear approaching. He stopped in the doorway and locked eyes with me for a brief second as if I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I immediately got the impression that he wasn't sure what to think of me either. I remember him having a mustache, trimmed but not precise, deep, dark brown eyes, and a pursed mouth. At this point, we're talking about 15 to 20 seconds of time has elapsed since I saw the back of my mother's head leave my sight. I could feel the adrenaline gearing up and the fight-or-flight response getting ready to launch. I figured that I wasn't sure what was going on, but I didn't think I wanted to stick around to find out what that guy thought about my presence either. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder and snapped around quickly to confront whatever. It was my mother. Before I could process the information feeding from my eyes to my brain, I was suddenly back in the brightly lit, loud, busy room I was just in before these events. It was like the way a TV displays an image and then redraws the screen. 1 millisecond, I was a couple of 100 years in the past. The next millisecond, I was right back in modern time. My mother had a puzzled look on her face and asked me, "Where did you go?" That about caused me to shit myself. My mother was referring to the fact that I, apparently, suddenly stopped in mid-movement in the room and just seemingly checked out for a second. I told her what I just experienced. She, being a very religious person, attributed it to the devil and evil spirits and just kind of moved on. I was bewildered and immediately left the area and waited for everyone else to finish their tour of the place while I waited outside, questioning reality for an hour. To this day, I have no fucking idea what happened, and I'm barely able to describe the experience with any degree of precision that does it justice. I had a few unsolved mysteries moments while living in Europe, but this one was leaps and bounds above the rest. I suppose that with my active imagination, passive environmental observations, and power of suggestion, I could have just had a funky brain fart moment. But vividness and time-lapse were so visceral. I don't openly advertise this, and while I find the paranormal an interesting subject, I don't believe any of it. And this is the closest experience I've had with something that could potentially change those beliefs. Story 2. I've had strange, creepy, and/or just plain cool things happen randomly all my life. Here's one I think may just fit in the Glitch in the Matrix forum. This has been happening for years now. Maybe longer, but it only came to our attention maybe 6 years ago. A little bit of backstory. My mother and I have a very close bond. Close enough to have our own telepathy that normally comes when people know each other so well that they either think the same thing or know what the other will say or think in a certain situation. We also have a habit of telling each other about any strange dreams we had the night before, whether they be dreams about dancing fruit or just truly weird dreams about the apocalypse or dead relatives. As for our glitch, I recall one night I was wearing headphones and reading on my Nook when I suddenly jumped up, startled from hearing my mom yelling for me. This wasn't totally unheard of. She would call for me if she simply needed help reaching something in a tall cabinet, so I didn't hop up and run to check on her or anything. I simply removed a headphone and listened for a second shout. When I felt it was safe to go back to my music, I did so, racking it up as my tired brain playing tricks that I was too lazy to pay attention to. I was a teenager, after all. After a while, it happened again. And again, there was no immediate second shout, so I finally removed my rump from my bed, disentangled my legs from my blankets, and got up to check. Rather reluctantly, I might add, seeing as it was 3 a.m. and I could possibly be bitched out for being up so late on a school night. I made it to her room to find her sleeping. I let it go because it wasn't the first time that it happened, and I knew it probably wouldn't be the last. I've always heard or seen strange things at night, and I've always just chalked it up to be an overactive imagination sucking up the leftover energy and creativity nobody else in the vicinity was using. The next day after school and work, as per our usual routine, my mom shared her previous night's dreams while we were cooking dinner. She told me of her dream about how I was somehow younger, maybe 3 or 4, and I wasn't listening to her. This is the sort of recurring dream of hers. Apparently, I don't listen to her in any of her dreams. Maybe it's a secret fear. Seeing as I'm not surprised by the contents of her dreams, I don't reply and let her go on. She goes on to tell me how I separated from her in a store and how all she could think was just to keep yelling my name like any parent would in that situation. She said she distinctly remembers just standing and screaming my name over and over, but she couldn't find me. I didn't find any of this surprising or even relatively entertaining until she told me how it woke her up enough to come check on me. She said she found me with my headphones still in my ears and glasses still on my face, so she did the normal motherly thing to do and removed the objects. She also remembered noting at the time that it was about 3:30 in the morning. I should mention that my mother and I are huge believers in the paranormal and have a great love for all things inexplicable. It makes us happy to know that there's more than just what we know out there. So, as you can imagine, upon telling her of my experience that night, it didn't take long to come to a consensus that I had heard her screaming in her dream. Strangely enough, it still makes me smile every time I think about it. Story 3. So I moved into this studio apartment about 5 months ago. It's part of a complex of 4 buildings, each with 4 to 8 apartments, depending on the building. Anyway, I never really noticed anything strange for a while. I would see residents during the day, either leaving or returning from work or errands, maybe walking to the dumpster to throw something away. However, only recently has a realization crept up on me. I used to get home late for work, usually around 11:30 or so I'd get home, and I started noticing that nobody had their lights on. No windows lit up. I figured everyone went to bed or something. Then I changed jobs and would get home much earlier. No one uses their lights. Ever. I don't get it. I make dinner and take out some trash, and my windows are the only ones illuminated. I feel like I'm the only one here at night. I mean, there are still cars in the parking lot, but no one is out or making noise. I almost feel like I'm being pranked. Either everyone here has night vision, or they're all lame and go to bed when the sun goes down. Or no one else actually lives here at all. Story 4. Hey folks, this literally happened just a few minutes ago and I'm thoroughly confused. I just boarded the C bus in my hometown, basically a mini ferry across an inlet that separates downtown from the northern shore, and I had the window seat I wanted sniped by a young Asian man in a blue and white raincoat. I opted to sit further down the aisle, and after about 2 minutes I looked back over at the man by the window. What was a mid-20s Asian man with black hair had become a late 60s Caucasian man with snow-white hair. Weird thing is, they were both wearing the exact same jacket and were sat in the same pose on their phones. I've walked around the whole C bus to find the Asian man, and he isn't here. There's no way he got off either. The doors had already closed when he sat by the window. So, am I crazy, or did I just experience a glitch in the Matrix? Story 5. Back in the early 80s, I had moved across country but was still in close contact with my BFF who had stayed in the old state. We talked on the landline every couple of weeks and wrote actual letters to each other via snail mail. Yeah, these were the dark ages. One day, I had slept late and was still laying in bed like a lazy young person I was, taking my time getting up to do whatever it was I was doing those days. I closed my eyes, thinking maybe I could go back to sleep even though I was pretty much wide awake. All of a sudden, behind my eyes and in my mind, I was flying in the air. But I wasn't flying in the air where my body was. I was flying in Old State, and knew exactly where I was. I looked down from way up in the air and saw an apartment complex. I had seen it from the road before and knew it was where my BFF had just moved into an apartment. All of this was happening as if it was the most normal thing, and without any thought at all, I decided I'd swoop down into her apartment, and what I guess was my astral body did exactly that. Here's the weirdest part of this whole experience. I passed through the electric wires going from pole to pole, and I could actually feel them as they passed through me, like a bzzz of quick electricity in lines across my torso. Then I was hovering up by the ceiling of her apartment. Never had been inside that complex before, but I can still draw the floor plan just as I saw it from above. And then I saw BFF walking out of the bathroom with her hair in a towel. She sat down on the bed against the pillows and got a silver book from her nightstand and began writing in it. And then, zap, I was back home, back in my body. My eyes flew open and I sat straight up thinking, wow, did that really just happen? I picked up the phone and called BFF. I told her, this is what I need you to do. Write down what you've been doing for the last half hour and send it to me. She was confused and asked me why, and I told her, I'm going to send you a letter telling you what I've been doing for the last half hour, and then we'll talk. I wanted some actual proof in writing, just for myself, that this had really happened, but to be perfectly honest, I never doubted it. Got the letter, and sure enough, she'd been taking a shower and washing her hair. Then she wrote in her journal, a little silver book. She got my letter with the floor plan of her apartment and my description of what she'd been doing, and she wasn't all that surprised. She'd always known I was a little different. Story 6. I was talking to my best friend one day about life, and things were really calm and chill. My disclaimer here is that I was decently tired, but I've never hallucinated nor sleepwalked before or anything like that. It's still plausible that that was the cause, but it felt so different. To continue, randomly in the middle of our conversation, she said that I entered some sort of trance and everything I said sounded as if I were reading it from a script. During this time, I remember opening my eyes and saw an oak desk under me and a paper with words and equations all over it. I remember writing with some sort of quill, but it was made from what looked like some kind of animal bone. So as this happens, I'm reading through this scribbling and then it hits me. A huge wave of excitement and relief as I discovered something huge on this paper. I then woke up. I told my friend about this and she suggested that it might be me in a past life, a memory of something that I was working on. Perhaps an inventor? I would throw all of that away and not worry about it if not for what happened next. I smiled at her, I don't remember any of this part, and started spewing out excited knowledge at her. She was smart enough to write it down. Pretty much all I ended up saying is, our universe is a shadow of another universe, meaning that our 3D world is a shadow or projection of a 4D world. I made it clear that it was possible that our universe might be a shadow of a shadow. The speed of light, quantum entanglement, gravity, and other universal laws are all footprints that prove this and will be shown to the world in the next few years. I made it clear that nature would not allow for a natural speed limit in the highest order universe. All human consciousness in every human is actually a single being in a higher order universe. This means that we're all connected in a very direct way. We do not have free will. I kept repeating this for some reason and stating that if we did not have free will, the random cosmos would not exist. I don't know what that means. It was such a strange experience because I woke up crying and smiling at her. I explained that I saw my past life and could feel things that he felt, the excitement and whatnot. We talked for a while and she explained everything that I told her and everything she wrote down. So little of it made sense to me, and I'm completely confused as to where any of that came from. I haven't slept in 2 days, but I'm extremely happy and excited about all of this. It feels so surreal. Story 7. So, I've just found this subreddit after looking for information on Alice in Wonderland syndrome. I'm a 21-year-old guy, and I think I have had many relevant stories to share with you here. Here's one of my favorites. I'd been experiencing a huge amount of synchronicities in my life, aged 17 or so. My friend and I were obsessed, always talking about them. I was fond of the idea of Carl Jung's that the more you write down, be aware, and talk of synchronicity in your life, the more you will experience. And not necessarily in a you notice them because you're looking for them, but in a thought manifesting into reality way. Anyway, My parents and I have always loved deep, meaningful conversations about space and time, philosophy, UFOs. We call them hot tub conversations because one holiday in Florida we had many of these conversations in a hot tub, and my dad's birthday was coming up. We'd recently talked about coincidences a lot, and I happened to explain to him the differentiation between coincidence and synchronicity, a little bit about Carl Jung's thoughts, etc. He found it really interesting. Anyway, his birthday was a week or two later, and I'd kind of forgotten about this conversation. For his birthday, I thought it'd be cool to find a book online to buy him that was written by someone of the same name. Now, I wouldn't consider my dad's name to be hugely common, although not massively obscure either, so I wasn't getting my hopes up. I found a book written by an author of the same name, and the book was Incredible Coincidence: The Baffling World of Synchronicity by Alan Vaughan. He obviously thought this was amazing as well, which was great. No better way of explaining it than this. What's more, the book has been an invaluable source of information on synchronicity that I read often. Story 8. I don't publicly speak about this event, but after studying various accounts on this page for a few weeks, I thought I would add my story to the mix. Thanks to you all for motivating me to contribute. In the summer of 2005, I was between my junior and senior year of college. Me and one of my closest comrades, who I'll refer to as Jay, took a day to do some sport climbing, beer drinking, and bouldering. Now, Jay and I were both fairly seasoned climbers, and we frequented the area of Jemez Springs, New Mexico, on almost any weekend we weren't tied up working. Likewise, we had a tradition of using a certain filling station because the gentleman who worked there didn't card us when we bought beer. We were both 20 at the time. Furthermore, we would frequent this filling station approximately 20 to 30 times a summer for beer and gas, but mostly beer. On this early July day, Jay and I were in the near vicinity of the filling station. However, we couldn't find the gas station. This was very unusual. We knew, within inches, the location of this filling station. After doing a few passes of the area, Jay drove his Tundra off the road to get to the area where the gas station was in the past. However, it simply was not there. And then it got weird. When we turned off the road, we went down a 1 or 2 meter embankment, and neither of us recalled the road being elevated to the gas station. Then, in the spot where we knew the gas station to be, the land was undeveloped and pristine. Jay stopped the vehicle, and we both exited, looking around and scratching our heads. There were no power lines, no gas station, no car noises, no airplane noises, just an eerie and haunting quiet. And after about 2 to 3 minutes of loitering, Jay and I decided we would just call the filling station. In 2005, we didn't quite have the infrastructure for locating things on our cell phones and such as Google Maps and iMaps. However, you could Google a number and call if lost. And, you guessed it, no cell signal. Now, not an uncommon occurrence in the wild whereabouts of New Mexico, but we both frequently called and texted our friends, girlfriends, and family whilst out on our camping excursions, and were not at a point where we had previously lost signal. And to make things just downright funky, right before Jay and I decided to leave and find the road, a lone jackrabbit coyly approached us from the south. The rabbit sniffed and approached cautiously and came to about 15 feet of Jay's Tundra. Now, I've spent much time in wide open spaces, and I've never, ever seen a rabbit exhibit that behavior. Yeah, this could have been a friendly rodent looking to meet some grisly college-age climbers, but it was just weird. After raising our eyebrows at one another in response to the rabbit incident, Jay and I climbed back into his Tundra and hastily bolted in the direction of the road, east, and the weirdness thickened. There was no road, or we couldn't find it. We drove 100 or 150 miles east, no road. We backed up, drove north, no road. Our pace and attitudes were becoming frantic. This parallel dimensional charade lasted almost 5 minutes. We were swearing, sweating, and losing our minds. Then, out of a blur in our periphery, we found the highway. We were so ecstatic to find our refuge back to society that Jay almost smashed a Honda minivan while eagerly swerving onto the road. We spent the rest of the afternoon quietly mulling over our thoughts at the base of the pitch we were going to climb. Needless to say, we didn't climb it. The entire episode lasted close to 10 minutes, and to further substantiate our testimony, both Jay and I hold graduate-level degrees in the fields of physical science and healthcare. This event subsequently has led to my attendance of conferences related to physics, quantum mechanics, and I even attend a string theory workshop in Massachusetts. Though I'm not necessarily a believer in string theory, but that's for a different time. Here's my 2 cents on what happened. Our scientific father Einstein discussed parallel universes, and realities, or perceptions thereof, existing simultaneously, each dimension relativity, to the other in their version of space-time. I explain what happened to us as so. Space-time is like a tree, and each branch represents a separate and unique dimension. Much like a tree, some dimensions are entirely similar and some are not. And, like a tree, wind and environmental factors can affect the pitch, yaw, and attitude of the branches. Sometimes, branches of a tree touch or become entangled. For the sake of this form, we can call this a glitch. Jay and I were on a branch that glitched with another dimension, though similar but entirely different and unique. As to the factors that cause the branches of the tree to glitch, we would have to travel down the rabbit hole of relativity, dark matter, quantum physics, the 4th dimension, and other odds and ends that I cannot discuss in this media. However, this is the anecdote that I use to describe our experience, though I've only ever shared this theory with Jay, his wife, and my wife. Due to the credibility of our educations and the positions we hold, we don't discuss this incident with academics or friends alike. It just sounds nuts. Story 9. It was time for bed. I was about 6 years old, and my mother was out grocery shopping, so that meant my stepdad would put me to bed. He had the doorknobs switched around so that my room would lock from the outside. I'd frequently get scared at night, and I guess that was his best idea for keeping me in my room. So I'm curled up in bed, locked in, and I start hearing the most random sounds, like people laughing and talking, Jack-in-the-Box music, and that boingy springing sound when it pops out, etc. So many sounds, it was like I was in the middle of a circus surrounded by people or something. I became so afraid that I rolled up into a ball and hid under my blanket. My back was facing the ceiling, and in this moment of complete fear, I felt this adult hand press on my back. Instantly, I thought it was my mother, so I popped up, took off the blanket to greet her, and quickly realized that no one was in the room. All I remember past that was crying myself to sleep. I'm 20 now, and I still can't sleep on my stomach or in any position that exposes my back. Here's some other weird things I have zero explanation for, in no particular order. Number 1. In the same house mentioned above, my sister swears on her life she saw shadow figures walking across the wall and a pair of pants walk around our room. We both would hear the weird circus and carnival sounds at night, but the above with the hand pressed on the back happened a bit before we shared a room. She had this big-ass toddler bed, a converted crib thing, and I'd frequently climb inside of it to protect her. We were always scared shitless. Number 2. I talked to my dead grandfather when I was 3. Mom and her boyfriend, my future stepfather, were talking while I was alone in the back seat talking to someone too. They turned around, asked who it was, and I said, "Papa Eddie." My stepfather and mother just started seeing each other, and he hadn't yet mentioned his father, Edward, had died of cancer. Number 3. I dreamt that my mother killed herself when I was in 6th grade, woke up before school and ran into her room to tell her. When I got home, we had a long talk and she started sobbing and hugging me, saying God talked to me in the dream because she was planning on overdosing on meds while we were at school. She was going through a really bad divorce from my stepfather. Pretty sure you guys can already tell from the doorknob thing that he was extremely abusive. Number 4. One of my gerbils disappeared. Literally this past week. I have two, in a big-ass aquarium shelf thing that's weighted down. There's no way he could have gotten out. I'm convinced the other one somehow ate him and all the evidence overnight. That's the only logical explanation. My boyfriend's really confused by this also. It's like he was never even in the tank. I really wish I had the receipt from the pet store or pictures or anything because my good Mr. PM disappeared. The light one's called Mr. AM and the dark one's called Mr. PM. Number 5. My Furby. Oh God, this thing was alive, I swear. My entire family doesn't even joke about this because my mother threw the batteries away and the thing was still talking at night. It would giggle and blink and I can still hear the terrifying robotic Furby blinking sounds. Story 10. So, I think my mom experienced a glitch of some sort in April of 1999. My mom, my grandparents, and I were on our way home from Midway Airport outside of Chicago, Illinois at about midnight on April 13th, 1999. We were driving on I-55 somewhere between I-355 and I-294 heading west. This section of the interstate is 5 lanes, and in the middle lane, a car full of young adults has broken down. A couple people had gotten out of the car and were trying to push it off to the right shoulder of the road. As we were passing them in the second lane, the one immediately to the left of the middle lane, a semi was to our right and hit the car and the people pushing it. My mom said that she looked back and saw the car flipping up into the air, along with numerous other cars crashing, flipping over the median, and driving off the road trying to avoid the crash that had just occurred. According to my mother, all of the cars around us were crashing. Only us and the car in front of us had made it out of the pileup unscathed. She said there were probably at least a dozen cars involved, and that there were definitely multiple fatalities, just from the car of young adults that had been plowed into by the semi. The weird part about all of this is that there's no record anywhere of it happening. My mom, my grandma, and my grandpa all vividly remember it, up until their deaths even for my grandparents. My mom had talked to an Illinois state trooper that she knows to see if he knew anything about it, and he seemed to know what she was talking about and confirmed that there were multiple fatalities, but offered no other information about the accident. This is the only source she's ever been able to track down to consult about it aside from my grandparents, though. She's never been able to find any articles online about it, which is strange considering it would have been an incredibly devastating accident on a major interstate in Illinois. And I was just posting to see if anyone else has an explanation about what kind of glitch could have occurred, or if anyone else remembers this or has some sort of record of it. We've both looked all over online, and I thought maybe the Reddit community would be able to help us out here.